Welcome to Know and Sell Pointers, everybody. Today we are going to talk a little bit about brand. In our last Know and Sell Pointers, we spoke about Yes Brand and the origin of mine because it had to do with improv, and we were talking about improv. But today we're going to take a little more of a considered approach. But let me introduce myself. I'm Hirsch Repun, the message therapist, and I am joined by
Dr. Nancy Zaire, sales whisperer.
welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
Um, let's talk about the sales whisperer brand a little bit and how that came about.
It's interesting because, every time I do that whisperer, I'm tempted to whisper. And of course, it's not really about whispering at all, right? Because branding, at least for me, is a shout.
Right. It's more about broadcasting than whispering.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I know that everybody is aware of the fact that I wear colored hats, and I get asked about it regularly. So it is my branding statement is to wear this cowboy hat. In fact, it actually has become the logo for nancyzaire.com, the cowboy hat. But I'll share with you why it is that I'm wearing the hat. And as you know, Hirsch, I sometimes have worn multiple hats, not just one. And it's
Right.
because entrepreneurs, solopreneurs wear many hats. They juggle a lot of different activities. And the one that they usually push aside, don't like so much, is that marketing sales function. And I'm putting them together because they really are a continuum. It isn't that you market separately from sales or you sell separately from marketing. They truly are a continuum. And hence, that's the hat people dislike wearing. And for that preneur, they find themselves wearing it 40, 50, maybe as much as 70 or 80% of the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Nancy. Especially, it made me. I made a note of the meaning of even the word brand. We talk about what does brand mean, and where did it come from, and of course we know that it came from the actual act of branding, of putting your imprint on something that you own, and that could be a horse or it could be anything, but the idea was you're burning in fire the image of what you stand for and what you are. And now we're doing that kind of every day. We're doing it with the many hats, or we're doing it with a certain color. I have a friend who always wears red, and it really does, yeah, but it really does work when you have a very strong sense of what's behind it. And I think that's what we wanted to really get at today, as especially as relates to sales and marketing, because the who we are part we've talked about, and once that's done, you still have the whole challenge of bringing your brand to the point of sale, and dealing with those many different personalities while still remaining the same.
Yeah, and there, as you and I have discussed, but I think it's worthwhile revisiting this concept. Many people try to be all things to all people, and hence they don't niche, they don't specialize in one particular um, service or one particular audience. And again, that fear of missing out, we want to be all things to all people. Whereas the truth is that when we brand ourselves and we're very clear who it is that we want to serve, those people become, strangely enough, more populated in our environment. And it's almost like the reticular mechanism in your brain starts seeing and attracting those people. Hence, that's what a brand is all about. As you suggested, initially it implied ownership of something, but in this case, it is uh, broadcasting to society, this is what I stand for. These are my values. This is who I am. Would
Yeah.
you agree? Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. I was talking with someone yesterday who was saying, I have to niche down. I have to niche. I know I have to niche. And I was like, but she said, but I don't want to exclude this and I don't want to exclude that. And I said, niching isn't necessarily about excluding a certain type of business. Like I only work with people in the medical profession. That's one way of niching, but you can niche by personality traits, by character traits. That I work with this type of person, and I think that for you and I, certainly appropriate for what you do, but I think for you and I, that kind of is the case a little bit. It's about the type of personality that we fit with best. Do you feel that that's accurate?
I was absolutely nodding my head and concurring with you, Hirsch, because I totally agree. Who we want to serve is that mission driven, heart centered entrepreneur who wants to make a difference in the world. And while that begins to describe a certain person or personality style, there's more to it than that. This is somebody who's invested in their occupational credential. They have studied or gotten a certificate, a license to do what they do. They love what they do, really geek out on it. So they certainly have intellectual prowess, but at the same time, they're action takers. And I think it's important for us to emphasize that as part of the characteristics of the person that we work with. I recently took on a client, and I'm having to serve as a accountability chief, which is not something, Hirsch, that I particularly enjoy doing. And that's because he lacks that go-getter. He lacks that, drive. It's in his head. He says he's interested, but he takes no action. Hence, he really does fall outside the domain of who is my favorite client to work with.
Yeah, I understand that. I realize now that in forming the message therapist brand, that I was encouraging clients who need not just consulting, but also a degree of coaching. I hadn't thought of myself as a coach. I hadn't thought of my brand as a coaching brand. When I started Yes Brand as both a podcast and a kind of a copywriting and consulting business, I didn't think of coaching. But with message therapy, I've realized that because so much of it is listening, so much of it is going deep on what a personal brand wants to accomplish, that I realized they're coming to me as well for accountability, coaching. And I still don't have to say I'm a coach because I already say I'm a message therapist. It already implies a certain amount of guidance and accountability.
I have been curious for a long time and never asked you, and maybe members of the audience are curious too. Why is it that you capitalize message? All of the letters are capitalized. Tell me about what that means to you and your brand.
There are a couple of reasons. This is a wonderful question. It's true. You never asked me that. That's a very deliberate thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, because obviously it's a play a little bit on massage therapy, on massage therapists. And so the first thing people look at is that word, message. And I want them to separate the two words, message and therapist, because I want them to spend a little time with their eyes looking at that first word. Often they'll go back and they'll say, was that massage therapist? Was that? But it puts an emphasis on the first word, message, so that if they were to look at it alone, it's clearly the word message. And then they can marry it with therapist.
Yeah. I hope that you're finding this as fascinating as I do as you're tuning in, because to brand your message, to brand your company, there's a real art form to it. It isn't just the words. It isn't just the logo. There's a lot of meaning behind it. And I'm really glad, Hirsch, that I have pulled from you and teased out the meaning behind yes, comma, brand. We see the bubble, and the bubble, of course, means communicate, right? Speak.
Right. Right.
The brand with the trademark, which of course you've trademarked, you know what you're doing. I now understand that the and is outside the circle because it has different, you know, it's that improv background. So you see, there's so much richness in understanding and decoding somebody's brand.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. And also it comes back to when we talk about brand, there's always going to be a visual element. It
Mhm.
doesn't, it's like you said, it doesn't have to be the logo, but there's a consideration of how you put it in writing. And for example, yes brand, when I'm writing it or when it appears in conversation, it's always capitalized. The whole thing is just capitalized. I had tried at one point doing the and in like a parenthesis or whatever, but that would have been what the logo was, you know. And that's what corporate brands do. They don't always present their brand name as it appears in the logo. Maybe there's, you know, the reason the TM thing is that I didn't mention that. The reason the TM thing came up was before even trademarking the name or knowing that it was going to be a big name, I just knew I was working with brands, and part of a brand's process is trademarking themselves.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
just was a subliminal uh, subliminal touch point that I wanted to include so that when people see the name of my company, it's completely communicated that this person deals with branding, with the action of imprinting. And so it was kind of a subliminal touch.
Mm. Well, you may remember that the name of my company is actually Rapport Builders, and the final sound is spelled with a Z, Rapport Builders, because my last name starts with a Z. But I will share very candidly, because this is how many of the things come to me. When I went, this is, good 15 years ago when I first started my business, Rapport Builders. And I went online to get a URL, and I found out that Rapport Builders with an S was taken. And of course, if I wanted it, you know, would I pay $10,000 to get it? Well, no, I wasn't willing to pay 10 grand. I'm sure you can appreciate that. So what I did is I changed the S to the Z, and that has now become a very significant part, Hirsch, of everything that I do, because I add that Z even to, you know, Zales, although I know that there is a brand of jewelry by Zales, so I can't do that. But you know, but
Yeah.
at any rate, yeah, I have adopted the Z. I've adopted the hat, you know, as my devices for branding.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, when I saw Rapport Builders, by the way, it was after we had met, and it was a way for me subconsciously to just connect that to you because I didn't necessarily know that that was your company, you know. But seeing it with the Z, I'm like, ah, okay, so it's a Zaire. If there's that connection. So I think in a little bit of a summation in this very short, you know, pointers episode, no and self pointers episode, we're stressing that there are many aspects to a brand. There's the way that you write it. There's the way that you create a visual representation of it. It's the representation that goes into the oral version, what people hear, the representation that goes into how it's presented in text. There's visual, and then there's, most importantly, I think we both agree, the internal inspiration
Yeah.
of what it means, what goes into it, what's behind the brand.
Yeah. So we're curious to know about what informs your brand. So when you're listening to the replay, or again, if you're here live, you know, jump in and let us know what is informing your brand. And if you're looking to take it to the next level, perhaps you're saying to yourself, I don't really have a clear brand, then reach out to us. We'll do our best to help you think through what you need to do to communicate your uniqueness, because indeed you have uniqueness. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, that really sums it up. Oh, I did want to say that if you have the odd question about brand, this is a great episode where you can just put in the comments some questions for us. We're always happy to answer them. And
Great.
And that's it. And I can do the sign off first. I can since I began the conversation. So for No and Sell Pointers, I am Hirsch Repun, the message therapist.
And Dr. Nancy Zayer, sales whisperer to your sales success.